Hey guys, it's me again. This makes it our seventh time hanging out. Today, I want to share a little story about keeping pets when I was a kid. Did any of you guys ever raise baby chicks growing up? Back when I was in elementary school, there were always tons of street vendors setting up little stalls right outside the school gates, selling literally everything. You don't really see that anymore, which actually makes me a bit nostalgic. At the time, my older cousin and I went to the same elementary school. I was living at my grandma's house back then. As for why, I'll go into detail about that in another video. Anyway, after school, my cousin and I would sometimes walk home together. One day, there was a vendor outside the school selling baby chicks. They were those tiny palm-sized newborn chicks, and their feathers were dyed all sorts of crazy colors. I thought they were just way too cute, so my cousin and I bought one each and took them back to my grandma's place to raise. Just as a quick side note, I only found this out later when the adults told me, but those were what people called 1 week chicks. Basically, some shady vendors would take sick chicks and dye their feathers bright colors to trick kids into buying them. They were called 1 week chicks because they usually wouldn't even live past a single week. But anyway, getting back to the story. I still remember we found a shoebox, put the chicks inside, and gave them some water and rice. That was our whole setup. We were so worried they'd get hungry while we were at school during the day and no one was around to look after them. We had zero experience and had no clue how many times a day a chick was supposed to eat. So, we asked my grandma to keep an eye on them and give them more food if they finished it while we were out. She said yes. Well, after just a few days, the chicks suddenly died, both of them at the exact same time. We asked my grandma how they died so suddenly, and she said she had no idea. She told us she had been feeding them, but when she went upstairs early that morning to give them more rice, she noticed the food from before was completely untouched, and the chicks just weren't moving anymore. My cousin and I were totally heartbroken. We blamed ourselves, thinking they died because we didn't take good enough care of them. We couldn't bear to just throw them in the trash, so we talked it over and decided to wrap them up in a small woven mat, the kind you sleep on in the summer. We placed them in the alleyway right next to the house. Over where I lived, there was always a narrow alleyway separating the houses. About a week went by, and I suddenly wanted to check on them. I told my cousin I wanted to lift the mat and see how the chicks were doing. She was super worried and asked, "What if they're all rotted?" I said, "I don't know, I'm scared too, just come with me." So we hyped each other up, gathered our courage, and lifted the mat. To our complete surprise, both chicks were completely gone. There was nothing left but an empty mat. My cousin and I just looked at each other in shock. In our naive little kid minds back then, the only logical conclusion we could come up with was, maybe the chicks never died and they just ran away. Looking back on it now though, I remember there were always a lot of cats hanging around my grandma's neighborhood, both stray cats and house pets. Honestly, chances are they were probably scooped up and eaten by a cat. Thinking about it this way, we thought the chicks died because of our poor care, but in reality, they were already sick to begin with and never really stood a chance, no matter how we raised them. We also thought they hadn't died and had just run away, but the reality is they were probably scavenged by a cat or maybe even a rat. It makes me realize that a lot of times, my judgments are based solely on my own limited past experiences, which isn't necessarily the actual truth. That's gonna be it for today's little story. Thanks so much for listening, guys. I'm Ping, a new YouTuber, and I'll catch you in the next one.